Uh, Dear Mr. Costa, at first I would like to thank you for the opportunity to interview you. I need to say that it is a great honor for me to be here since I greatly admire you for all your incomparable philosophical achievements. So I have a short question to put to you. What's the question? Well, the question is, how would you explain the distinction between analytic and continental philosophy? Well, the answer is very simple. Indeed, it can be derived from the small book of mine, The Philosophical Inquiry, which I've published some years ago, explaining once and for all the nature of philosophy. Thus, in order to answer your question, I need to say something about the theory exposed in the book. According to this book, philosophy is a derivative cultural activity. It's like the opera. The opera is an artistic activity combining plot, poetry, and music. Philosophy, too, is a kind of amalgam of motivations, materials, and procedures borrowed from three fundamental cultural activities: art, religion, and science. These cultural activities can be represented as forming the corners of a triangle inside of which the various philosophical activities find their places. The scientific corner of the triangle is responsible for the solid, practical, reality-bounded, and truth-oriented aspects of philosophy. The mystical religious corner is responsible for the speculative, transcendental, verbally inexpressible element, usually grounding the comprehensiveness of all philosophy. The traditional breadth of the philosophical quest in its inquiry about the world as a whole and the man's place in it belongs to this originary motivation. The aesthetic corner, the aesthetic artistic corner, finally, is responsible for the metaphorical dimension that, to different degrees, is always unavoidably present in philosophical discourse. As you know, all art is dependent of metaphor. We can use this schema to classify the various forms of philosophy. We can locate them in different positions inside the triangle. At this center, we can locate philosophies that, in a balanced manner, have scientific truth-oriented, religious, transcendental, and aesthetic, metaphorical dimensions. A paradigmatic example is Plato's Republic. However, there are forms of philosophy located near to the scientific corner of the triangle, like Carnap's logical grammar of language, Quine's word and object, and Austin's how to do things with words. Well, there are works near to the mystical religious corner, like John Scott's On the Divisions of Nature and Meister Eckhart's treatises, and not so near, but sufficiently near, the works of Hegel and Plotino. Moreover, there are those near the aesthetic corner, works by poet-philosophers like Nietzsche's Zarathustra, and almost crossing the border, maybe already having crossed the border, Novalis' Hymns to the Night. And there are also works near to the one side of the triangle, like Heidegger's writings, which can be placed near the aesthetic religious side. We can also use such a triangular diagram to classify entire cultural traditions, linking philosophy with a corner or the other corner of the triangle. These are the cases of the scientifically oriented English tradition, the mystically oriented German tradition, and the belletristically oriented French tradition. Finally, the relationship between the components are not stable. It's possible to perceive in the subdomains a wide gradual movement from the aesthetic mystical side of the triangle to the scientific corner, as an inevitable consequence of the continuous and now accelerating advancement of science. The answer to your question is now obvious. The analytic philosophy is today the Anglo-Saxonic tradition of scientific-related philosophy, while the continental tradition we are speaking about, the aesthetically mystically related tradition that we can see already in Edmund Husserl and is clear, very clear in authors like Derrida or Deleuze in France, and in authors like Habermas and even Wittgenstein in the German tradition. Wonderful! You answered not only my question, but in a short stroke you answered the whole problems of the metaphilosophy. I am delighted. Such a grandiosity of thought makes me feel losing the ground under my feet, and I think I cannot continue this interview. Don't worry, we are under friends, and this is no section of psychotherapy. In my view, the person who makes the interview and the person who gives the interview are deep inside the same person. This is what Hegel called the identity in the difference. I guess we're nothing but the same person under different guises. Nothing